Hello. So welcome to our next chapter. So we are doing from our audit in 100 pages. So we have done with all of these chapters, and today we will be doing your professional ethics. Now your professional ethics, very important chapter. This I have covered in about 8 to 9 pages. So make sure you watch this video till the end, and we will try that we cover all the clauses and you remember all of them. Okay, so this comes for average 12 to 13 marks in every attempt. Okay, and let's start. So your professional ethics. So for this also I have in the end I have I have made a table so that all your clauses or all your clauses are covered in one page so that it is easier to remember, and all your tricky clauses also, for example what is allowed, what is not allowed. So everything in red is not allowed. For example, this is your clause 7, so everything is red, not allowed, and everything in green is allowed, so that it is in a tabular format, so it is easier for you to remember. And make sure you also solve the question bank for this chapter because it is a comparatively conceptual chapter. Okay, so let's start your professional ethics. Now this is about approximately 163 pages in your ICA study module, which is covered in about 8 to 9 pages in our notes. Okay, so first of all, our chapter starts with your code of ethics. So your code of ethics has some certain fundamental principles. Now your fundamental principles, first is your integrity, second is your objectivity, third is professional competence and due care. By professional competence means you should be capable, you should be able to do this, you should have the requisite knowledge. Fourth is confidentiality. That means whatever facts, whatever figures you get during an audit, you should maintain them as confidential. You should not give it to someone else unless required by law. And fifth is your professional behavior. So during the audit, you should always have a professional behavior. So these are your 5 fundamental principles. That is your integrity, objectivity, IOP, CP, IOP, CP, IOP, CP. Okay. So I is integrity, O for objectivity, P for professional competence and due care, C for confidentiality, and P for professional behavior. Okay. Now there are certain threats. So there are certain threats. There are 5 types of threats. First is your self-interest threat. Second is your self-review threat. Third is advocacy threats, familiarity threats, and intimidation threats. So by intimidation, you mean by scared, whenever someone intimidates you. So self-interest means when in such a case where your own interest might come before your work, in such a case it is the self-interest threats. So financial or other interest will influence professional judgment of the accountant. Self-review threats is accountant will not appropriately evaluate results of previous judgment, because self-review threats means this you had already reviewed before and now you are checking this work was done by you and now you are auditing this. So of course you will not be able to give a fair opinion. Next is your advocacy threats. That is, accountant will promote client to the point that his objectivity has been compromised. Familiarity threat, close or long relationship, which he will be sympathetic to their work because he is familiar to the client. And last is your intimidation threat. That is, accountant deferred from active objectively because of undue influence. That means if your client is able to influence you in such a way that you are not objective in your work. Okay, now in evaluation of threats. So what is your acceptable level? What is your acceptable level of threats? So level at which the accountant using the second test, that is your reasonable and informed third party test. So level at which the accountant using this test would likely conclude that the accountant complies with the fundamental principles. So if another accountant does this test and checks that yes, the fundamental principles have been satisfied, then in such a case it is your acceptable level. Okay, now what is this test that we are talking about? The reasonable and informed third party test. Whether the same conclusions would likely be reached by another third party. That means if DHEER was not auditing this client, if another auditor was auditing this client, would he have reached the same conclusion that DHEER has reached? So whether the same conclusion would likely be reached by another party. Third party need not be an accountant but should possess the relevant knowledge and experience to evaluate the appropriateness of the accountant conclusion. So it is not necessary that he should be an accountant, but he should have the proper expertise and so that he can make the same or accountant conclusions. Okay, addressing the threat. So there are 3 ways to address the threat. You can either eliminate the threat you can eliminate the whole threat. That is, whatever threat was existing, you will remove it. So eliminate the circumstances, that is the interest or relationship that are creating these threats. Which threats? These 5 threats that we are talking about. Okay, next is your applying safeguards. If you are not able to eliminate the threats, of course best is if you eliminate the threats altogether. But if you're not able to do that, what will you do? You will apply safeguards. That means how to prevent those threats. That is where available and capable of being applied, wherever you can put safeguards. And third is declining or ending specific professional activity. If you feel that this has a lot of threats and you are neither able to eliminate the threats nor are you able to apply safeguard, what will you do? You will decline. You will decline, ki, boss, sorry, I cannot do this. There are too many threats in this. So these are your three ways of addressing threats. Okay, now when we say safeguards, what do you mean by safeguards? It is action taken by accountant that effectively reduce the threats. We are not saying eliminate the threat, we are reducing the threats. Reduce the threats to an acceptable level. So these were the very important: acceptable level, reduce it to an acceptable level. Example, have a non-team member review work or involve another firm to re-perform the part of engagement. So by this way, you will be able to know whether work has been performed objectively or not. Okay, now next is your NOCLAR provision. So your NOCLAR provision, that is non-compliance with laws and regulations. So if your client does not comply with any laws and regulations, in such a case, what do you have to do? So NOCLAR tells you what to do. Accountant may come across an instance of non-compliance with laws and regulations. Non-compliance with laws and regulations. Therefore, it is called NOCLAR. Non-compliance with laws and regulation. Therefore, it is your NOCLAR. So he may come across such instances committed by the client, those charged with governance or the management. He is not required to investigate nor responsible for ensuring compliance. He does not have to dig deeper in this. So, sir, in such a case, what do you have to do? You will have to tell the appropriate authority. So, applicability. So as per the ICI code, so it is there are two ways of to determine the applicability. One is as per the ICI code, that means to which entities is NOCLAR applicable. So audit assignment of listed entities in India whose net worth is greater than or equal to rupees 250 crores. So listed entity, first of all, it has to be listed entity and net worth has to be greater than or equal to rupees 250 crores. Senior staff, senior professional accountant employees of listed entity. So it is applicable to the listed entity and to the senior professional accountant employees. That means to the entity also it is applicable and to the employees also applicable. Now which employee? That is your senior professional accountant employees of your listed entity. Okay, so this we studied as per the ICI code. Now there is another code, that is your IESBA. So your IESBA code of ethics makes NOCLAR applicable to all. That means they say that NOCLAR is applicable to all, but ICI has put some limit, that is your listed should be and your net worth should be equal to or greater than rupees 250 crores. Okay, so now what are your steps? Steps is, first of all, you understand the matter. That means what laws and regulations have not been complied with. Then so first is understand the matter. Second is address the matter. Third is seek advice so that you know what to do. Fourth is you have to determine whether any action is required, any other further action is required. Fifth is your imminent breach, and sixth is your documentation. That means you will have to document all of this, whatever processes you have followed, whatever you have identified, all of that has to be documented. Now next is what is the difference between your NOCLAR and your SA 250, because SA 250 also talks about laws and regulations. So first of all, your NOCLAR is applicable on all professionals in service and practice. You have to remember it is for all professionals in service and practice both. However, your SA 250 is only applicable on audit and not on other assurance engagement. It is only applicable on audit and not other assurance engagements. Okay, next is stakeholders. Who are your stakeholders? That means who are concerned with this? Your investor, creditors, employees, public. So NOCLAR has a much broader scope, whereas your SA 250 does not define any stakeholder. And NOCLAR can decide whether to report to TCWG or authority first. That means, for example, for whichever law you have contravened, should I tell the authority first or should I tell TCWG? Your NOCLAR gives you that option, but in SA 250, this such option does not exist. Okay, so this we are done with our basic part of the chapter. Next is your membership of the institute. Great. So membership of your institute, applicant's name will be entered in the register and certificate of membership will be issued by council. So what you have to understand that even after becoming a CA, you still have to become a member of ICI. So to become a member of ICAI, there are certain formalities that you have to do. Only then will you get a membership number, and you will be, and your name will be entered in the register. Okay, disability for the purpose of membership. That means in some cases, ICAI will not allow you to be a member. What are those cases? First is not attained the age of 21 years. If you are not 21 years old, you will not be able to become a member. Next is if you are unsound, if you have an unsound mind, or if you are an undischarged insolvent. So 21 years insolvent and unsound mind. 21 years unsound mind and undischarged insolvent. These are your three conditions. Then fourth is being removed from membership of institute due to guilty of misconduct. So we will be studying the clauses later. So if you have already been removed from the membership of institute due to guilty, because you have been guilty of misconduct, in such a case you will not be allowed. Next, convicted in or outside India, for an offense. Now this offense should involve moral turpitude and imprisonment. So if because of such offense, either in India or outside India, and this offense has moral turpitude and your imprisonment, in such a case you will not be allowed. Next is your discharged solvent but insolvency caused due to his misconduct. So either you are undischarged insolvent, or you are a discharged insolvent but insolvency was caused because of you due to his misconduct himself. In such a case, all of these cases you will not be allowed to be a member of the institute. Okay, now classes of members. So now there are two types of members. First is your associate and second is your fellow member. So associate or fellow, what is the difference? Any person whose name is entered in register will be entitled to use ACA after his name. Okay, so that is your associated chartered accountant, whereas your fellow and associate member who has been in continuous practice, for a period of equal to or more than 5 years, he will be your fellow CA, that is your FCA. Okay, so first of all, when your name is entered in the register, you will be a ACA. Only after you have been in continuous practice for a period of equal to or more than 5 years will you be allowed to put as FCA. Okay. Next is removal of name from the register. So in which cases will your name be removed? Of course, if the person is dead, your name will be removed. Second is request received for removal. If you have requested, I say that boss, I don't want my name in this register anymore, please remove it. So request received for removal. Third, not paid prescribed fee. What you might be aware that to be a member of ICAI, you have to pay an annual fee every year. So not paid prescribed fees, then the name may be entered again on receipt of application plus arrears plus late fees. So if you put your name later in the register, we will be allowing you to enter. We will put your name in the register only and only after you pay the fees, whatever arrears, that means whatever past balances are due, and your late fees. And fourth is subject to any disability under section 8. Okay. Next is the restoration of membership effective date. That means if your membership was removed and now it is being restored to you, then what will be the effective date? So if the application for restoration of name has been made in the same year of removal, if it has been made in the same year, then your effective date will be the date on which it is removed. So your effective date, it will be deemed that on the date when you were removed, your name has been entered on that date itself. Basically, you were never not a member of the institute. Only and only if the application was made in the same year. If removal is due to High Court or the Board of Discipline, if removal is in such a case, then your effective date will be as per order. That means whenever they pass an order for your to be a member again. The next is for other cases, it is the date of application plus fee received. That is whenever you give the application and the fee, that will be your effective date. Now, punishment for false claiming to be a member. That means the person who is not a member of institute but still projects himself as a member of institute. In such a case, the first time penalty will be maximum rupees 1000. It will be maximum rupees 1000, and for every subsequent such claim, it will be maximum rupees 5000 plus your 6 months imprisonment. So first time is 1000, every subsequent is 5000 plus your 6 months imprisonment. Okay, so this was everything related to membership of your institute. Now next is your CA in practice. So there are certain things what your CA in practice can do, etc., etc. So either you can be CA in practice or you can be CA in service. So when you are in practice, that means you started your own firm, you would audit your own clients. When you are in service, that means you are working for someone else. So what is the significance of your COP? COP is your certificate of practice. What is its importance? So no member shall be entitled to practice unless obtained your COP. That means if you want to start your own firm, if you want to have your own certificate of practice, only and only if you want to start your own practice, it will only be possible after obtaining your COP, that is your certificate of practice. So first of all, you have to be a member of institute, then you also have to obtain a certificate of practice. Next, you have to pay an annual fee. Of course, nothing is for free. And next, CA whose name has been removed from membership. As I told you, both of these are separate. You also have to be a member and you have to take your COP separately. So CA whose name has been removed from membership cannot appear before tax authorities before whom he could have appeared as a member. So this was a long-standing doubt. So this has been clarified. So whose name has been removed, he cannot appear before tax authorities before whom he could have appeared as a member. That means if he was earlier allowed to appear before tax authorities when he was a member, since now his name has been removed, he will not be allowed. Cancellation and restoration of your certificate of practice. So your certificate of practice will be cancelled if name of certificate holder is removed from the register. That means if you are no more a member, your certificate of practice will also be removed. Council is satisfied that COP was issued based on this D should be over here. It should based on misleading or false information. So while you are applying for the application, if you issued them any false information, they can remove it later. If the member has ceased to practice, that means the member does not practice anymore, then of course your COP will be cancelled. Member has not paid annual fee for COP till your 30th September. Okay. Now your restoration will be with effect from when cancelled if outstanding fees paid before expiry of the relevant year. Your restoration will be cancelled if the outstanding fees have been paid before expiry of the relevant year. Okay, now other points that you have to take in mind is CA in practice. CA in practice is allowed to render your management consultancy services. So there are some 28 services that have been specified. I have not put those in the notes, but I recommend you to check the ICA study module. This you will find on page 18.24. So there are 28 services which have been mentioned, which are CA in practice. CA in practice will be allowed to render. These are called your management consultancy services, and you will find a lot of questions on these. Next is no company can practice as a CA. No company, that means it has to be an individual or a firm. So no company can practice as a CA. Company, director, manager, all of these are fine. So first time you will have to pay a fine for first time. It is rupees 1000, and for every subsequent it will be rupees 5000. Okay, so this penalty is same if you see over here 1000 and 5000. Over here also it is 1000 and 5000. First is 1000, subsequent is 5000. Okay, next. Member of institute permitted to use CA irrespective of whether in practice or not. So it is not necessary. If you are a member of institute, you will be allowed to use CA. It does not matter whether you are in practice or whether you are in service. If you are a member, you can use the letter CA before your name. Members in practice cannot use any other designation other than CA. That means if you are in practice, you cannot put other designation, you can only put CA. However, member in not practice are allowed to do so. That means if you are practicing, if you have your own firm, then in such a case, you can only put CA, while all other people are allowed to put any other abbreviation. Members can put designation CA at home nameplate. That means the nameplate that is outside your home. You can put your name as CA so and so. Name of the home plate at name of the firm at home plate is not allowed. That means outside your home, you can put your name, you can put DHEER MODI, but you cannot put your firm's name. Name of firm at home plate is not allowed. You can put your name, but not your firm's name. There are questions on this point also. So I hope you are listening to this lecture carefully. Okay, next is your maintenance of branch accounts. Maintenance of branch accounts. Now, this is a very important concept. Please make sure you hear it carefully. So, any CA in practice or a CA firm, CA in practice or a CA firm, if he has multiple offices, if he has more than one office in India, so any CA in practice or a CA firm, if he has, for example, two offices in India, that means if he has more than one office in India, In such a case, what should we do? For each office, for every office, there should be a separate member in charge. This same person cannot be in charge of both the office. There has to be a separate member. What are important points? First of all, there should be separate member. That means there should be two, or how many offices you have, you should have that many members. Second is he should be a member. He should be a member, not just a CA, but he should be a member of the institute. Now this condition is exempt in some cases. That means if even if you have multiple places of business, even if you have multiple offices, you do not have to put this condition if member practicing in hilly areas. Because what happens in hilly areas, for example, you stay in Himachal Pradesh. Now Himachal Pradesh, it rains during winters, and you have to shift to another place within Himachal only, to a less hilly region. So in such a case, of course, you will have multiple areas. Now that you cannot have two people for both the businesses. Therefore, this condition is exempt. So allowed to open a temporary office in the city, maximum for a period of 3 months. So that's why they put 3 months, because during the winters it becomes very chilly. Next, name of board of firm in temporary office shouldn't be displayed other than those 3 months. That means whatever your temporary office is, name of your main firm should only and only be put over there, not during other times. That means when this office is shut. Temporary office not mentioned on any document. Since this office is temporary, your main office is where you originally was, you cannot mention this office in any document. And next, inform institute before opening and after shutting the temporary office in winter. So you will have to tell the institute that, boss, now I'm operating from this office, and once the winters are over, you will have to tell them again that, boss, I'm shutting this office and going to my main office. Okay, now this condition is also exempt. So first I told you, if you are practicing in hilly areas, this condition does not need to be satisfied. Your second case, this was your first condition of being exempt. Your second condition of being exempt in second case is, if the second office is located in the same premises. For example, if in one building you have one office on your first floor and one office on the fourth floor, they are located in the same premises. You do not need multiple members for this. So if they are in the same premises, one person can handle both the offices. Next, if the second office is located in the same city, so even if the second office is located in the same city, you need not have another person responsible. However, if your second office is located within a distance of 50 kilometers from the municipal limit of the first office city, that means if your offices are located in two different cities, I told you, if they are located in the same premises and if they are located in the same city, you need not have another separate member. However, if your second office is located, say for example, this is your city 1 and this is your city 2. Okay. Now your first office is located here. This is your main office, and your second office is your branch office. Now, if this branch office is within 50, if is within a 50-kilometer range of the municipal limit, okay, it is not 50 kilometers from the first office address. It is 50 kilometers from the municipal limit. Therefore, I've made the arrow only till here. So this is your municipal limit. This border is your municipal limit of the city in which the first office is there. If your branch office is within 50 kilometers of this municipal limit, in such a case, you need not do a member for the branch office, because it is within 50 limit of the municipal limit of the main office. Okay, so I hope this point is clear to you. And with this, we are done with your brief points of your professional ethics. Now we will be starting with schedules. Very, very important. So I'll I'll make you go through the schedules first. So these are your schedules. So basically there are two schedules. This is your schedule 1 and your schedule 2. Now your schedule 1 is divided into 4 parts, and your schedule 2 is divided into 3 parts. Okay. And first, very important is your schedule 1 part 1. Okay, so we will be starting with schedule 1 first of all. Great. So now your schedule 1 is professional misconduct in relations to CA in practice. Now this, what you have to remember, this is your professional misconduct for CA in practice. There will be professional misconduct for CA in service also. Okay, so this is professional misconduct in relation to CA in practice. So first clause is allows any person to practice in his name as a CA except partner or employee. That means this will be considered as a professional misconduct if you allow any person to practice in your name as a CA. Who all are allowed? So therefore I've put it in green. Who all are allowed? Your partner or your employee, they are allowed to practice in your name, but no other person. Now, second clause is pays commission. Okay, you have to remember that second clause is pays, while your third is accepts. You have to remember. How do you remember this? In life, always you have to pay first, only then you will receive something. So therefore, pays come before accepts. So pays commission in fees of his business to any person other than your member partner or person under section 53A. So that means you are allowed to pay commission in fees to whom? To your member, to your partner or person specified under section 53A. Okay. Allowed to share with members, partners and persons covered in regulation 53A. That is who are these people who I'm telling? That is your company secretary, that is your CS, then your cost accountant, actuary, bachelor in engineering, technology or architecture, law and your MBA. That means only with these people, these are the people mentioned in section 53A. Only with these people you are allowed to share your commission in fees of business. That means if you receive any business from them, you are allowed to pay them commission. So share of profit or sale of goodwill, share of profit or sale of goodwill in case of partnership firm. So the legal representative, example, say for example the widow, the legal representative can continue to receive profits provided the partnership agreement specifies. So if the agreement specifies this, it will be allowed. And in case, so this was in case of partnership firm. Second is in case of proprietorship firm. So for proprietorship firm, fees or profits cannot be shared. Fees or profits cannot be shared between legal representative and the purchaser. Payments can be made in parts, but the sale should be completed within 1 year of death with your ICI permission. So this was with regard to your proprietorship firm. Third is accepts part of profits of professional work of person. That means you are not allowed to accept part of profits. If you give professional work to someone, you are not allowed to receive commission. You are not allowed to receive part of profit. Except from whom you are allowed to receive? Members. You are allowed to receive from members or the 53A person. So these people that you are allowed to pay commission, you are also allowed to receive commission from these people. Then your fourth clause is enter into partnership with person. That means a CA in practice is not allowed to enter in partnership with people. It will be considered as professional misconduct. However, you are allowed to enter into partnership with certain people. So allowed with CA in practice, person covered in regulation, that is person covered in regulation 53B. Now you have to make sure, you have to remember that this is different. Till now we were studying 53A, now we are studying 53B. So now who are the people in 53B? 53B have all the people mentioned in 53A. They have all the people mentioned in 53A. Additionally, advocate and MBA. This MBA that was specified over here, this MBA is not allowed under 53B. So in 53B, if all the people under 53A also include advocate, but remove the people who are doing MBA. Okay. Next is secures professional. This is your clause number 5. So clause number 5 secures professional business through a person. Secures professional business through a person who is neither an employee nor a partner or by means not open to CA. So if you secure any professional business through a person who is not your employee, who is not your partner or by any means which is not open to CA, that means which is not allowed as per CA. However, you are allowed to secure business from your employees or partners, not allowed by means not open to CA. So whatever the line says, that is what has been explained. Okay, next, very important is your clause number 6. Clause number 6. Now I've made this table. If you're watching this video one day before your exam, so please take a screenshot of this so that you able to remember. Clause 6 talks about solicits clients or professional work by a circular, advertisement or professional or personal communication. So this is basically with regards to advertising. That is how you advertise yourself, what is allowed and what is not allowed. Solicits clients means how do you get clients. So all the things that are not allowed have been put in red, and all the things that are allowed have been put in green. So most complicated point in this is members responding to tenders by use of professional service. So if any tenders are floated in such a case, when is it allowed and when is it not allowed? So if the tender which has been raised for whichever service, if such service is exclusively reserved for CA, that means all the people who can apply to this tender are nobody but CAs. That means it is within the same fraternity. So if such service is exclusively reserved for CAs, and okay, both of these conditions have to be satisfied. So first of all, it should only be available for CAs, and there should be no minimum fee prescribed in the tender. There is no minimum fee prescribed in the tender, then you are not allowed to respond to the tender. So if it is only reserved for CAs and no minimum fee prescribed, then you are not allowed. However, you will be allowed if such service is not reserved for CAs. So if such service is not reserved for CA, that means CAs and other people, other uh, people from other industries are also allowed to uh, go for the tender. In such a case, you will be allowed. Or when will you be allowed? If such service is reserved for CAs, that means at this point only, it is exclusively reserved for CAs and minimum fee prescribed in tender. That means over here, as I told you, no minimum fee prescribed. If no minimum fee prescribed, then you are not allowed. However, if a minimum fee has been prescribed, then you are allowed. So what do you have to consider? If it is not reserved for CAs, you are allowed. If it is reserved for CAs and a minimum fee is being prescribed, then you will be allowed. In other cases, you will not be allowed. Okay. Now we will first cover what all things you are not allowed. Advertising association with a coaching institute, you are not allowed to do so. Advertisement in the press, that means in any news, etc., you are not allowed. Any roving inquiries for empanelment for allotment of audit work. So you might know that to get audit work, you have to empanel with companies, etc. They have a list of auditors from whom they choose. This is called your empanelment of auditors. So first you have to register with them, and later, whenever they have worked for you, they will select from the empanelment and select you. So if you want to be part of this empanelment, if you make roving inquiry, that means you do not know whether they have an empanelment or not, but you are making roving inquiries. So roving inquiries for empanelment for allotment of audit work, that is when he does not know whether there is an empanel or not. If you do not know this, whatever inquiry you make, this will be called as roving inquiry, and it will not be allowed. Share firm profile with prospective client. You are not allowed to share your firm profile with prospective client. If they really like you, what is the point behind it? That you should not advertise and get work. How you should get work is through word of mouth. That means your work should actually be good. Only then should you get the work. Name exhibited differently than others in movie credits. If in movie credits your name can be allowed. However, if your name has been exhibited differently, for example, a different font is used, or if it is made more colorful to attract the attention, that is not allowed. Sponsorship of an event, not allowed. Member sponsoring CSR activity, mentioning the firm name or the CA logo, that is also not allowed. So if you are sponsoring any CSR activity, in such a case, mentioning the firm name is not allowed. Acceptance of OG professional work. OG means original. So acceptance of original professional work by a member emanating from the client introduced to him by another member. That means, your friend CA Raj, he introduced you to another client of his. Now what happened? This client contacts you later that, boss, the work that Raj was doing, you do it for me at a cheaper price. Now this is not allowed because this client was introduced to you by another person in a CA fraternity. So therefore you are not allowed to take work from this client. Only and only after you tell your friend Raj that, boss, he has approached me, is it okay if I take work from him? Only then will you be allowed. Next, videos of educational nature on the internet. So if you are putting any educational nature, if you are putting videos of educational nature on the internet, either on YouTube, for example, anywhere, firm name and mobile number is not allowed. You can put videos, but you cannot put your firm name or your mobile number. Next is on your website. On your website, you cannot put name of client or what fees you charge, or you cannot put any advertisement. That means through the website you cannot earn. You cannot put advertisements on your website. You cannot put your name of clients. You cannot put what work you do for them. You cannot put what fees you charge from them. All of this is not allowed. Okay, now let's see what things are allowed. You are allowed to request, another CA in practice for work. You are allowed to ask them for work who is another CA in practice. You can put advertisement for changes in partnership or resolution. You can put an advertisement in the newspaper for any changes in the partnership or resolution. You can put a classified ad. So as I told you, advertisement in press is not allowed, but certain advertisements are allowed. Therefore, I put it side by side. Okay. So classified advertisement in your ICI journal, newsletter for sharing professional work, seeking partnership or employment, all of this is allowed. Okay. So as I told you, roving inquiries for empanelment is not allowed, but writing to organizations to include firm name provided he has knowledge of existing of such empanelment and quoting fees on being inquired. So if you know they have an empanelment, only then you are allowed to do so, but you cannot make any roving inquiries. Next, I missed this point. Professional attainment of himself or firm in a book and article is not allowed. If you put any professional attainment, that means your professional achievements that are not allowed. But when you write this book, am I allowed to use my name as CA DHEER MODI? Am I allowed to use the designation CA and name of firm? Yes, you are allowed to do so. So you can put your name, you can put the name of the firm, but you cannot put your professional attainments. Okay. Designation CA or name of firm in the greeting cards, marriage, invitations, etc., provided it is sent to clients, friends, and family. So this is allowed. So you can put the designation CA, you can put the name of firm in your greeting cards, marriage invitation, etc., provided it is only sent to your client. That means your already existing clients, your friends, and your family. So this is allowed. Any silver, golden, diamond, platinum, or sanitary celebrations of a CA firm for your 25, 50, 75, or 100 years of celebration. This, if you are publishing in newspaper, celebrations of CA firm published in the newspaper, this is allowed. Now, sponsorship of an event I told you is not allowed, but sponsoring event conducted by your PO unit of ICI, this will be allowed. That means only if it is related to the ICI will it be allowed. Any member sponsoring CSR activity mentioning prefix name with CA, that is allowed. So you cannot mention the firm name. What you have to make sure is when you are sponsoring a CSR event, you cannot mention the firm name, but you can mention the prefix CA. If the client comes through the other member dealing generally with his original work. So as I told you over here, when your another CA friend introduce you to a client, if this client contacts you separately, that is not allowed. But if this client comes with the friend that introduced you, that is, if the client comes through the other member generally dealing, that means if both of them, what I say wants that you should not be stealing another CA's work. So if the client comes through the other member dealing generally with his original work, that will be allowed. What did I tell you? Videos of educational nature on the internet, your firm name and mobile number is not allowed, but the video itself is allowed. There are no restrictions on uploading videos. And last, with regards to your website, as I told you, name of clients, fees, etc. is not allowed. But on the website, you can put the biodata. You can put the biodata of the partner. That means whoever are partners in your partnership firm, that is allowed. And you can put a passport size photo on the website. Okay, you cannot put photos of receiving any awards or any other photos, only passport size professional photos. Now this was your clause number 6, very important clause. Next clause is also very important, that's your clause number 7. Now your clause number 7 talks about advertises professional achievements or uses designations other than CA on documents, letterheads, etc. So your clause number 7 talks about all your print media. So if on documents, letters, invitation cards, your visiting cards, what all is allowed and what is not allowed. So these are your different types. So that is your professional documents, visiting cards, letterheads. What is not allowed? Professional attainments, not allowed. Designations other than CA, not allowed. Date of setting up of practice, none of this you can mention on your these documents. What is allowed? From what universities you received your degree, that is allowed. If you are an insolvency professional, you can write that. If you are a registered valuer, you can write that. If you are a member of a foreign institute of accountancy, you can also write that. So all of these are allowed. Now, notice in press, that means if you are giving anything in the newspaper. So success in an examination or undesirable publicity of himself or of the firm is not allowed. That means if it is undesirable publicity, that is not allowed. But success in an examination, if it is not undesirable publicity, then it is allowed. Okay. So for your reports and certificates, it use letterhead of firm for issuing reports. So whenever you are issuing a report, you should be using the letterhead of the firm. Okay. Next is TV, film, or internet. So all of these your electronic media. So for your TV, film, or internet, promoting himself or the firm is not allowed, but you can use the name, you can use the title CA, and you are also allowed to use the firm name, but you cannot promote yourself. Next is talks or lectures. Firm name is not allowed. So when you are giving talks or lectures, you cannot use your firm name. You can only use the designation CA when acting in capacity as a CA. Otherwise, you are not allowed to use the prefix CA also. Writing articles or letters to the press. Writing articles or letters to the press, name and CA both are allowed. For name or signboard, that is the signboard that you put outside your house or outside your office. So at the place of residence with firm name, it is not allowed. If you remember, we studied this earlier also. That means outside your residence, you can put CA DHEER MODI, but you cannot put your firm name. So at the place of residence, firm name is not allowed. Any glow signs or light on charge signboards are also not allowed. That means it has to be a just plain simple text, no dimchak. At place of residence with name of member, name of member is allowed, but name of partnership firm is not allowed. Prospectus or public announcements when your director is a CA. Now, when your director is a CA, when you are a CA in a company and you are a director, so now whatever prospectus is issued or any public announcements are issued, CA firm name of the director you cannot specify. Advertisement of professional attainment of the director also, that is not allowed. Now, what is allowed? Now what is allowed is your prefix CA and particulars of directorships held in other companies. So particular directorships held in other companies, that is allowed. That means this person is director in which other companies is also allowed. And any form, the firm logo is not allowed, only your CA logo is allowed. Okay. So if you want more detailed guidelines, of course, these are your summarized notes. If you want more detailed guidelines, you can visit page 18.1 to 8 of the ICA module. So there you can get an in-depth understanding. So your next is your clause number 8. So we have done your 6 and 7. 6 and 7 are very important clauses. Next is your clause number 8. So accept position of auditor without communicating with your previous auditor in writing. So if there was a previous auditor before you, in such a case you have to communicate with him. You have to communicate with him before accepting the position as an auditor. So incoming auditor may accept engagement. Incoming auditor may accept engagement in case of disputed fees with previous auditor. So if there is in case of any disputed fees, that is allowed. But what are the cases when not allowed to accept? In which cases will you not be allowed? So non-compliance with section 139 and 140 of the Companies Act 2013. Non-payment of undisputed audit fees. So if there is disputed audit fees, that is okay. But if there is no undisputed audit fees, then in such a case, the payment should be made. So therefore, no non-payment of undisputed audit fees unless it is a sick unit. And third is issuance of a qualified report. So if the previous auditor had issued a qualified report, in such a case, you cannot accept without first communicating with the previous auditor. Now, case 1 and case 2, these two cases, auditor who accepts the audit would be guilty of professional misconduct. He would be guilty of professional misconduct if he still accepts the audit with in cases 1 and 2. However, in case 3, he may accept the audit if he is satisfied that the report is qualified without good and valid reason. That means if he has checked the report and he feels that the previous auditor has given a qualified report with not a good reason, it is not a valid reason, in such a case he may still accept and he will not be considered guilty of professional misconduct. where the previous auditor, if the previous auditor is not available for accepting payment of undisputed fee, that means the previous auditor, you cannot communicate with him for some reason, he is out of touch. So if the previous auditor is not available for accepting payment of the undisputed fees, advise client to make a DD. Now in DD, what happens? You make the payment first and you get a slip. So therefore, you have to tell the client that boss, you at least make a demand draft so that the money is not in your bank account. Okay. Now, what are the steps? Ask the company if the previous auditor was informed of the intention to change. You have to ask the company, that means the auditor was before me. Does he know that you are changing the auditor? If they tell you that yes, he has been communicated, you also communicate with the previous auditor. However, if no, if they say that no, we have not told the previous auditor, you will ask reason for the proposed change. You will ask them that boss, why are you changing your auditor? Now, if the reason that they give you is valid, you will communicate with the previous auditor. But if the reason that they give you is not valid, you do not accept the audit at all. You do not accept the audit. Okay. So, and your end result is you will always, if you accept the audit, you will always have to communicate with the previous auditor. If your previous auditor fails to respond to communication, that means you have sent them a communication but they do not respond, new auditor can go forward after waiting for reasonable time. That means you have to make sure that you have communicated. Just sending a letter is not enough. They also have to. Okay. Next, certificate of letter posting cannot be accepted as positive proof of delivery to recipient. Just a certificate that you have actually posted a letter, that is not enough. It has to be made sure that that has actually received to the person. That means, for example, when you receive a courier, you have to give a signature that yes, I've received this. So the courier should be of that point. That is, certificate of letter posting cannot be accepted as positive proof of delivery to the recipient. Next, if the office was found locked or firm was not found at the given address, that means if the office was found locked, that means the person is not available. In such a case, it will have to be deemed to be delivered. That means that person is not at his place of residence or the address that he's given. What do I do in such a case? It will be deemed to be delivered. This is applicable for all audits, not just your statutory audit, but your all audits. So your statutory audit, internal audit, GST, income tax, concurrent, etc., etc., all types of audit, this is applicable. In case of acceptance of government audit, now there is a certain leeway given to government audits. If there is no time to wait for the reply, if you do not have time to, if you do not have, you still have to communicate, you still have to send your letter. But if you do not have time to wait, if you do not have time to wait for the reply, the auditor may give conditional acceptance. He may give conditional acceptance to the client of the government audit and commence work which needs to be attended immediately. That means if this is a case of urgency, he can do so, provided he gives the conditional acceptance that only and only if that auditor, only and only if the previous auditor has nothing adverse to say, in such a case, I will continue the audit, otherwise I will have to stop midway. This was your clause number 8. Now coming to your clause number 9. Remember, we are still in schedule 1, part 1. Okay. Now your clause 9. Clause 9 talks about accepts appointment as auditor without ascertaining if 139, 140 and 142 have been complied with. These sections are of your Companies Act 2013. Now what are these sections? We had studied these earlier also. 139 is your appointment of auditor. 140 is your change of auditor. 141 is eligibility and qualifications of auditor, and 142 is remuneration of auditor. So if an auditor does not ascertain compliance with these sections, he will be considered guilty of your professional misconduct. Don't accept certificate from management that all sections have been complied with. That there is a question on this where the management says that yes, we've complied with everything. Don't just rely because they've told you. You cannot rely on them. You have to personally check whether all of these conditions have been satisfied. That means whatever these sections are, have they been complied or not? Now, how do you do that? You ensure that notice of resolution has been shared with the members. Check if the notice is sent to the original auditor. Notice of your appointment, check whether that has been sent to the original auditor also or not. Check copy of your minutes of meeting. MOM is your minutes of meeting. So check copy of minutes of meeting in which such resolution was passed. That means appointing you as an auditor was passed. Communication with original auditor in writing. This we already know we have to communicate. And last is obtain copy of communication by OG auditor to the board, that is your original auditor. So obtain whatever communication the board has sent to the original auditor, you have to obtain. Just the board thing, just the management thing that yes, we complied with everything, that is not enough. You have to do these things. Now next is your clause number 10. Clause number 10 talks about charges professional fees. Charges professional fees based on percentage of profit or which are contingent upon finding. That means you tell me, sir, I will find a fraud in your company, say for example 1 crore. Now this 1 crore if I find, that is on what are findings I find, 10% will be my fees. Now this is not allowed. You are not allowed to charge fees based on percentage of profit. It has to be a fixed figure or which are contingent upon finding. Now certain people are allowed. Who are allowed for liquidator. Now your liquidator is the person who sells the assets. So your liquidator gets a percentage of realization. He is allowed. Auditor of a cooperative society, he is allowed to charge fees on percentage of paid up share capital, working capital or profits. Your management consultancy services, they are allowed to charge fees based on your contingent findings. That means if they are findings, then we will charge you fees. Any fundraising, debt recovering services, they get percentage of funds raised or debt recovered. So if someone is providing service of funds raising or debt recovering, that means if you've given debt to someone and you are hiring me to recover those debts, I am allowed to charge you percentage of the debts I recover. Any cost optimization service, if you hired me for cost optimization, that means to reduce the cost, I am allowed to charge fees based on percentage of benefit that you derive from me. That means whatever cost saving I give you, I am allowed to charge percentage of that. And your insolvency professionals are also allowed. So usually, what does clause 10 say? That professional fees based on percentage of profit or upon contingent upon findings are not allowed. However, certain people are allowed. That is your liquidator, your auditor of cooperative society, management consultancy services, your fundraising, debt recovery, cost optimization, and your insolvency professional. All of these people are allowed. Next is your clause number 11. Clause number 11 says engages in business other than profession of CA. That means if you are a member of the institute, you should only and only be carrying out the service of CA. What a CA does, is that what they mean? Yes, they are trying to say that some things are allowed, some things are not allowed. So how do they do that? No specific permission is required. So basically they have bifurcated this into three different parts. First is these services you are allowed without taking specific permission from the council. Without taking, you do not to provide these services, you do not need any permission. This is your first bifurcation. Your second bifurcation is you are allowed to do these services only and only after taking approval of the council. This is your second type of classification. And your third type of classification is you are not allowed at all. Whether you take permission or not, these type of services you are not allowed. So either you are allowed without any specific permission, you are allowed with specific permission, or third is you are not allowed at all. So now what are the services where you do not need any specific permission? So employment under a CA firm, you do not need any other specific permission. If you are editor of a professional journal, what you have to remember, it is a professional journal only, then you are allowed without specific permission. Author of a book, you are allowed. Public office, that is your MP, MLA, etc., you are allowed. Part-time tutorship of the institute, that is, as you know, the institute also takes classes. So if you are providing tutorship over there part-time, you are not required to take separate permission. If you are a paper checker, setter, or moderator, paper checker, setter, moderator, setter, checker, moderator, checker, setter, or moderator, you are allowed. Your private tutorship you are allowed. Now there is an asterisk over here. You are allowed only maximum 25 hours in a week. That means, say for example, 100 hours in a month. So 25 hours in a week only you are allowed for private tutorship. No permission required for signatory of your MOA or A1. No specific permission is required for signatory of your memorandum of association or your articles of association. No specific permission if you want to be a surveyor or a loss assessor, you do not need. Recovery consultant in the banking sector, you do not need any specific permission. Okay, so these were all your services where you do not need any specific permission. I suggest you to pause the video, read it once by yourself, try remembering it red, green, and plain. Okay. Next is your prior approval of council. That is, to provide these services, you will require a prior approval of the council. First is employment in business where member and relative do not hold any substantial interest. If you are employed in a business where your member himself and the relative do not hold any substantial interest. Now, what is the substantial interest? I have specified over here when you are voting share. When you have voting share of 20% or more, that will be considered as substantial share. Next, employment in a non-business concern, that you will have to take, but only after taking specific approval. If you are MD, that is your managing director, or your WTD, that is your full-time director. So if you are an MD or a WTD of a company, that is where you do not have any substantial interest, you will be allowed, but you will have to take prior approval. So if you do not have substantial interest, then you can do with prior approval. But if you have substantial interest, you will not be allowed. That is your third category, where he plus relatives holds substantial interest, you will not be allowed. Interest in any educational institute, you will be allowed provided permission. Lectureship for courses other than those relating to institute examination. So if they are related to institute examination, you are allowed, but if they are not related to institute examination, then you need a prior approval. Tutorship under the educational institute. So what I told you, tutorship under institute, part-time tutorship under institute is allowed, but tutorship under educational institute, which is not of ICI, when I say other than institute, this I am specifying as ICI. So this you are allowed only provided you take permission of the council, and this also you are allowed only maximum 25 hours in a week. Editor of other than professional journal. If you are an editor, so as I told you, editor of professional journal, editor of a professional journal you are allowed, but other than professional journal, you are allowed only and only if you've taken a separate permission, prior approval. Okay. So as I told you, this if you hold substantial interest is not allowed. What does the second point says? Director in holding company, if auditor is of the subsidiary company. If you are an auditor, say for example, this is your holding company H, and this is your subsidiary company. So if you are an auditor here, director in holding company, you cannot be a director in the holding company. Okay. So if you are already an auditor of the subsidiary company, you cannot accept directorship of the holding company. Okay, this was your clause number 11. This is also very important clause, and I hope you are able to solve questions after watching this video. And coming to our last clause of part 1. Okay, so we are on schedule 1, part 1, clause number 12. So while you write the answers, you have to mention it in the reverse order, that clause 12, part 1, schedule 1. Okay, so while writing your answer, you have to do it in the reverse order. First you have to mention clause number, then part number, and then schedule number. So 12 says allows a person not being member in practice except partner to sign on any balance sheet, P&L report, certificate, or a financial statement. So you are not allowed, you cannot allow any person who is not a member in practice to sign your balance sheet, P&L report, certificate, etc. But some people are allowed. Who all are allowed? Except partner. So your partner is allowed to sign these statements. Power to sign routine documents on which no authentication is required can be delegated. So your routine documents can be delegated, but your balance sheet, your P&L, your reports, your certificates, your financial statement, these cannot be delegated. Certain reports and certificates can also be delegated. So now that means any other person can sign these. That is issue of audit query. This can be signed by someone else. That means whatever is in green, that can be signed by someone else. Asking for information, letter forwarding draft observations, initiating and stamping of vouchers, because these do not require professional judgment. These are very routine mechanical tasks, so therefore these are allowed. Attending to routine, this should be routine matters. Next, issue of memorandum of cash verification and other physical verification. All of these are allowed. Now, cases where this cannot be delegated, cases where this work cannot be delegated. So, your stock certificate, your GST certificate, and your net worth certificate, these are some areas where cannot be delegated. So, these I came across in certain questions, therefore, I specified these separately. And with this, we are done with your part 1 of your schedule 1 of this professional ethics. Now we are doing part 2. Part 2 is professional misconduct for members in service. When we did part 1, it was your professional misconduct for members in practice. Now it is for service. So this has two clauses. Two clauses. First is pay and second is accept. As I told you, in life forever, first you have to pay, only then will you receive. So pay any person share in emoluments of employment undertaken by him. That means if you pay a part of your salary to someone, that is not allowed. However, you are allowed to pay to relatives, dependents, friends, only if there is no relationship in procuring or retaining the job and payment is not for this. Or that means, for example, if someone helps you secure a job, if someone helps you secure a job and you pay them a part of your salary, you agree them that boss, please just get me this job, I will pay you 10% of my salary every month. That is not allowed. Therefore they say there should be no relationship, there should be no relationship in procuring or retaining the job. This amount that you are paying, this should not be related to you retaining the job. Next is your part clause 2, that is accept fees, profits or gains from your lawyer, CA, broker, customers of such company as commission. That means wherever you are in service, for example, you are working in Reliance. Now you are not, you should not accept any fees, profits or gains from the lawyers of Reliance, from the CA of Reliance, from the brokers of Reliance. That means whichever company you are working on, you should not receive any payment, you should not receive any profits, etc. from such people of the company where you are working. Okay, not very much to explain, therefore I have only written the clause. Next is your part 3, that is professional misconduct for members in general. That means this is applicable for all members, whether you are in practice or whether you are in service. Just being a member will be applicable to you. So not being a fellow of the institute acts as a fellow. As you remember, we studied above FCA. Okay, so if you're not a fellow but acts as a fellow, does not supply information called for or comply with requirements asked by the institute, council, board, or the committee. That means if they've asked you for any information, if they've asked you for anything to comply with and you're not complying with such, you will be held guilty as professional misconduct under clause 2, part 3 of schedule 1. Then your clause 3 is if you give false information. So your clause 2 was when you don't give information. Clause 3 is when you give false information knowingly while inviting work from your CA or responding to tenders. If you give them any false information, you will be liable under this clause. Next is your part 4. Part 4 is your other misconduct for members in general. So how did it go? We went for part 1, part 2, part 3, and part 4. This is your 4 parts in your schedule number 1. Now, your first part was professional misconduct. Second part is also professional misconduct. Third part is also professional misconduct. Your fourth part is other misconduct. Professional, other. Okay. Now, your first part was for members in practice. Second part was in members in service. Third part is members in general. And your fourth part is also members in general. Okay. So professional misconduct, other misconduct. Practice, service, general. Okay. So other misconduct for members in general. So if you are held guilty by civil or criminal court for an offense of imprisonment which is less than 6 months. So if it is less than 6 months, then you will come under this. If it is more than 6 months, that has been covered later. Okay. So if it is less than 6 months, it will be other misconduct part 4, clause 1. So clause, you have to write it in the reverse order. Clause 1, part 4 of schedule 1. And second is brings disrepute to the profession or institute through his actions in opinion of council. Now, of course, this is very subjective. No proper thing has been defined. But if you bring disrepute or to the profession or institute through your actions, you will be put under this clause. Okay, so now we are done with your schedule 1. Coming to your schedule 2. Your schedule 2 part 1. Schedule 2 Part 1 talks about professional misconduct in relations to CA in practice. Now, how do you remember this? In Schedule 1, your first part was also professional misconduct for CA in practice. Schedule 2 is also professional misconduct for CA in practice. So these are very small, so let's easily brush through them. First is discloses information acquired in course of professional work to another person other than the client. So if whatever information you receive, if you pass it on to someone else, you have to maintain confidentiality. You have to maintain confidentiality while doing the audit. However, if you pass this information to someone else, you will be held guilty for professional misconduct under clause 1, part 1 of schedule 2. Okay, unless the consent of client is taken or it is required by law. Okay, clear? Next is your clause number 2. Certifies or submits in his name a report of examination of financial statements unless records are made by him, partner or employee or another CA in practice in case of joint audit. So that means you are not allowed to certify or submit in your own name a report of examination of financial statement. However, you are allowed if these records were made by yourself, your partner, your employee, or another CA in practice in case of a joint audit. Your clause number 3 talks about permits use of his name in connection with estimate of earnings. That means if you allow your name to be used while forecasting the earnings, if you in connection with estimate of earnings, leading to the belief that he vouches for its accuracy, that you vouch for the accuracy, that means whatever the figures are in the report, you guarantee that yes, this is what will actually happen. This is not allowed. CA can prepare your P&L forecast provided he indicates clearly in his report. He is allowed to prepare your P&L forecast only and only if he clearly indicates in the report the source of the information, the source of whatever information he's received, the basis of forecast and the major assumption that he has made. That means, for example, if he's assuming a 10% CAGR, so all of these assumptions you have to separately make. So long as he does not vouch for the accuracy of forecast, he will have to say that these figures are based on assumptions, these are based on forecast. I do not guarantee that these figures are accurate or that this forecast is accurate. Next is your clause number 4. Clause number 4 says expresses opinion on financial statements of any business in which he, his firm or partner has substantial interest. So you are not allowed to express an opinion on the financial statements of any business if you, your firm or your partner has a substantial interest. What is substantial interest? That is your 20%. So not allowed a CA in employment to certify. A CA in employment is not allowed to certify financial statements of concern in which he is employed. He is not allowed to accept auditorship of college where he works as a part-time lecturer. Not allowed to accept auditorship of a trust where his partner is an employee or a trustee. Audit a company where his relative is a director, irrespective whether substantial or not. He is not allowed to be auditor of a company where he or his relative is a director. Write books of accounts for auditee clients. Of course, you are not allowed to write the books of clients. You cannot write the books of accounts and then be the same person checking them. Statutory auditor being an internal auditor, not allowed. Both of them have to be different auditors. Your internal auditor cannot be a tax or GST auditor. So your statutory auditor cannot be an internal auditor. Your internal auditor cannot be your tax or your GST auditor. This was your clause number 4. Clause number 5 talks about fails to disclose material facts known to him which is not disclosed in financial statements or disclosure of which is necessary. So if he fails to disclose this information, therefore he will be this will be covered under clause number 5. Clause number 6 talks about fails to disclose material misstatements in financial statements. Example, under provision of depreciation. If depreciation has been charged, say for example 1 lakh instead of 5 lakh, that is your under provisioning. So if you fails to disclose any material misstatements, this will come under clause number 6. Clause number 7 says does not exercise due diligence or is grossly negligent in conduct of professional duty. That means if any person other than this person would have checked certain areas and this person has missed, that means he's not exercised his due diligence. In such a case, he will be covered under clause number 7. Clause number 8 talks about fails to obtain sufficient information necessary for expression of an opinion. Now, your auditor's main work is an expression of opinion. If you fail to obtain sufficient information before expressing an opinion, you will be covered under clause number 8. So, in case the report was circumscribed due to inadequacy of data, that means if the report could not be completed because he could not get the proper data, auditor should express a disclaimer of opinion that boss, I have not received the data that I wanted, therefore I am providing a disclaimer of opinion. Your clause number 9 talks about fails to invite attention to material departure from generally accepted audit procedures. If you fail to invite attention to material departure from generally accepted audit procedures, this is also called as your GAP, generally accepted audit procedure. So if you follow some procedures which are different from the generally accepted audit procedures, you will have to specify that separately. You have to invite attention. So audit should be performed as per generally accepted audit procedures. In case the auditor was unable to perform such procedures, he shall draw attention to the material departures from such procedures. That was, I have not been able to follow these procedures. You will have to highlight it somewhere in the report. Statutory audit of listed entity can only be done by those auditors who have subjected themselves to peer review. So only if you have been peer reviewed, only then will you be allowed to do the statutory audit of your listed entities. Clause number 10 talks about fails to keep money of his client in separate bank account or use such money as intended. That means if your client has given you such money which is not your fees, that means if this money belongs to the client or he has given it to you to make some statutory payments, in such a case, you have to keep this money in a separate bank account. You cannot keep it in your bank account. Now, in certain cases, this is allowed. That is, if you receive remuneration, of course, the remuneration is your money received from the client that you are allowed to keep in your bank account because it is your money. So, any remuneration, any fees, any advance received, all of these can be kept in your bank account. These need not be kept in a separate bank account. Okay, now what is not allowed? Any money received for expenses to be incurred which are not intended to be spent within a reasonable short time. If it is not to be spent within a reasonably short time, you should keep this money in a separate bank account. You cannot keep this money with you. Example, in a short time or money received as a trustee. That means this money is you are only in possession of it. This money does not belong to you. Liquidator. So in all of these cases, it needs to be kept in a separate bank account. So this was your biggest. So your part 1 in your schedule 1 and in your schedule 2 are both the biggest. The rest are all small. Okay. So of course, as I told you, in your schedule 2 there are only 3 parts. Your second part is professional misconduct for members in general. That is contravenes provisions of this act or regulations. So your clause number 1 contravenes provisions of this act or regulations and guidelines issued by council. So there are certain regulations that have been issued. That is your registration 43, 46, 47, 48, 56, 65, 67, and your 68 to 70, 190, 190A, 191, and 192. So I am not reading out these regulations. You can pause and read out these regulations that are covered in your clause number 1. Then your clause number 2 talks about being an employee of firm, company, discloses confidential information. Of course, you cannot disclose confidential information. So if you are an employee of a firm or a company and you disclose confidential information acquired in the course of employment, you will be considered professional misconduct. You will be considered guilty of professional misconduct under clause number 2, part number 2, schedule number 2. Okay, so you have to go in the reverse order. I am telling it to you repeated times because a lot of students make this mistake. Third clause is submits any information, statement, return or form to council, institute or board knowing it to be false. If you submit any information which you know is false, in such a case, you will be considered under clause number 3. Clause number 4 talks about defalcates or embezzles money received in professional capacity. So if you received any money in professional capacity and this money you embezzle this money, then this will be under clause number 4. And your last part does not have any clauses because it is a very, very small part. That is your other misconduct for members in general. So held guilty by civil or criminal court for an offense involving imprisonment for more than 6 months. Remember, over there we had studied for a period of less than 6 months. So over here, if it is more than 6 months, you will be considered guilty under part 3 of schedule 2. Okay, with this we are done with all our clauses, and there are certain additions for your May 23. There are certain additions which have been made in May 23 for professional ethics. So what does it say? A self-interest or intimidation threat would arise if fees from a particular client represents major proportion of total fees earned by a firm. That means if all the clients taken together, if from one particular client you earn a major chunk of your total fees that you receive. In such a case, there might be a self-interest or intimidation threat because you do not want to lose this client, so you will not give an adverse report. So a self-interest or intimidation threat would arise if fees from a particular client represents major proportion of fees of total fees earned by a firm. Disclosure is required if the limit crossed for 2 consecutive years. So if these limits that we are going to study, if this is crossed for 2 consecutive years, a disclosure has to be given. Okay, now your auditee means your client. So if your client is a non-public, if it is a non-public interest entity, in such a case, disclosure to ICI has to be given. Disclosure to ICI has to be given if the gross annual professional fee. That means, for example, if my firm earns rupees 1 crore, if all clients together I get rupees 1 crore annually, but if from one particular firm I get more than 40% of my total fees, if I get, that means in such a case, if there is any one client who gives me more than 40 lakhs in terms of fees, then in such a case, I will have to disclose it to ICI. Okay, so 40% of total fees. So that is for your non-public interest entity. However, if it is a public interest entity, that means, what do you mean by public interest entity? Listed entity, banks, insurance companies, or defined by regulations. If you are a public interest entity, that means if you are either of these, if your client is either of these, in such a case, if you receive more than 20%, okay, over here we studied 40%. If you are a non-public interested and if you are a non-public interest entity, then it is 40%. If you are a public interest entity, it is 20% of the total fee. That means if I receive more than rupees 20 lakhs, then I have to disclose to ICI. Okay, now from this threshold, there are certain exemptions. So firms exempted if the total fee received is less than or equal to 20 lakhs, then these limits you need not check. Okay, over here, what do you have to see? You have to see total fee. It is not from the client, but it is this total fee that we are talking about. Next, audit client is exempt. That the audit client who you are auditing, if that person is exempt, that means if he is one of them, if it is a government company, if it is a public undertaking, if it is a national bank, or if it is a PFI, that is your public financial institution. So in such a case, you need not disclose to ICA. That means if your client is one of them. Next, appointment of auditor is made by the government or your regulator. So if you are appointed by the government or regulator, in such a case, you need not disclose to ICI. So these are your exemptions. Okay. So this was your with regards to fees. Now your second thing that has been added in May 23. This was your first thing that was added for May 23. Second thing that was added for May 23 is tax service to audit client. A self-review or advocacy threat. Okay, over here it was self-interest or intimidation threat. Over here it is self-review or advocacy threat. These type of threats we had already covered at the start of the chapter. So a self-review or advocacy threat may arise, hence prohibited or restricted. So now what things are you allowed? So you are usually not allowed to do tax service to audit clients. However, tax return preparation is allowed. That means if you are auditing the client, you can still make the tax return preparation. Tax calculation for preparing accounting entries If your auditee is your PIE, that is your public interest entity, if your auditor is your public interest entity and financial statements have a material effect, if the financial statements have a material effect, yes, then tax calculation will not be allowed. However, the financial statement do not have a material effect. If they do not have a material effect, in such a case, it is allowed if adequate safeguards have been taken for threats. Adequate safeguards means reducing the threats to an acceptably low level. Okay, so if you are a PIE, that is your public interest entity, but your financial statements do not have a material effect, or if you are a non-PIE, that means a non-public interest entity, then irrespective, you are allowed, provided you take safeguards for threats. Okay. Tax planning and advisory service may provide depending on the level of threat and safeguard, not to provide if effectiveness of tax advice is dependent on material accounting treatment. So you are not allowed to provide this if effectiveness of the tax advice is dependent on the material accounting treatment. That means what treatment should be given. If that is material, then in such a case it is not allowed. Last part of this chapter, tax services involving valuation may provide if valuation result not has any material effect on the financial statement. That means if this result does not have any material effect on the financial statements or is subject to external review by tax authority, that means your work is anyway going to be subjected by tax authorities. In such a case, you may provide such service. Next is assistance in resolution of tax disputes. If in case there are any tax disputes, if you give them any assistance, you are not allowed. If the service involves acting as an advocate before the court, you are not allowed. Or if the amounts involved are material to the financial statement, if the amount involved in the dispute, if they are material to the financial statements, you are not allowed. Advisory role is allowed, so you are allowed. That means court does not include tribunal. So you are allowed to act as an advisor, but you cannot assist in resoluting the tax dispute. And with this, we are done with your professional ethics.